All right, well, welcome back to my studio. Today I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about color theory. And I've decided to do that because this is a relatively new channel and I'm trying to figure out, what's the best format and that will address my viewers' interest. And right now I don't really have that many subscribers. But I've got a lot of people coming over from my previous channel, which goes way back several years, which was mainly for my students. And so a lot of them are still interested in me talking about more technical issues like color theory and drawing techniques and those sorts of things. So I'll start off each video right now, at least it's my intention, to start off each video with some sort of technical topic, and then go into more conceptual ideas about art making and talk a little bit about my specific works of art, what I happen to be working on right now in the studio. So yeah, first off, I want to start talking a little bit about color. And from my years of teaching, one of the things about color that always came up, and it was something that was one of the more difficult things for my students to grasp, was the use of black. So I'm going to talk about black, in future videos we'll also talk more color theory, talk about color schemes and those sorts of things. But today I just want to talk about black, and I'll tell you why. As a teacher, I'd have different supplies that my students could use, and if it was colored pencils or pastels or paints or whatever it was, inevitably the two colors that would be used up first that I was having to replace were red and black. Okay, red, okay. But the problem is with black is I very rarely, almost never use black. It's a very rare occasion when I will get out my black tube of paint and just paint with black. And there's a number of reasons for that. Number one is that if you just paint straight black onto an image, it kind of creates a hole because it's so dark, a black hole in your painting, and it is really a little too much. I think really causes damage to whatever it is you're painting, especially if it's representative art. It also, another reason is that it's just not as interesting as using your other colors to create those really dark hues. You can do that, and at first glance, it will look black. And so I'm going to do some demonstrations about how to use the other colors to create black, and that will I'm even going to be doing a value scale to show you that it's not just black but all the different grays. It gets a little tricky when you're doing the grays, but ultimately I think it makes for a much more interesting paint. So you avoid creating those holes in your artwork. And it also just gives you a little bit more depth to your work. So yeah, let's go ahead, and I'm going to work on a value scale here, and I'll let you see how I do that. I'm going to first do one with just black and white, which is what my students would inevitably try to do if they were trying to do work with black, is get that black paint out, and then to make the grays just by adding some white. But I'm going to do it a little bit differently, and to me that's I think it's going to make the paint a lot more interesting to look at. So let's take a look at my little value scale here that I've made. Okay, so I have created this little grid here that we're going to use to do a couple of different value scales. One using black and white, and then the other just using really, actually, I probably should get out another color here. Let me pull out a little bit of yellow. Okay, so you'll see that I just have 5 tubes here, and you'll notice actually most of these tubes have been used up quite a bit. The white, especially here, but my alizarin crimson and my French ultramarine blue. Now, you don't necessarily have to use those specific colors for this, but I pulled them out of my door because they have a nice dark value to work with when mixing up, as opposed to if you're using maybe a cobalt blue or something like that. It's not going to give you quite as dark of a value. But you'll notice that my black here has really hardly been used at all. In fact, I'm not, well, yeah, it looks like I have at least opened this at least once. So I almost never use black. I do have it just in case I feel like I want to do that. So let's start off by, let's go ahead and create just sort of the value scale here along that scale right there. And just to give us something to go by. Now, actually need very little black. That right there is probably more black than I would need. Whenever you're mixing colors, the darker value, you don't need nearly as much. And usually if you want to avoid wasting paint, you always start, if you're mixing colors together, start with the lighter value and then add to it the darker value, because the darker values will tend to dominate the color. So I'm just going to take my black, my pure black, and this last one, put that right in there, just like that. Okay, so there's my blackest black. Now, how could I possibly, this is where I'm not going to use black at all, so how can I possibly make that as black as that? Well, we'll see. Okay, so now my whitest white would be all the way over here, so we'll just leave, and that'll be the same for both of those. So I'm probably, we'll just put a pure black in there. So now let's go ahead and let me rinse some of this black out of my brush now, because that's going to, okay, so we're going to make sort of a middle gray right here. In fact, just from what's left in there on my brush, starting to do that. So, but let's put some white in here. And okay. So, and let's go ahead and put some white in all of these. Probably should have started with this one right here. And I'm not going to put my white on that one because my brush is still has a lot of that black, or a bit of the black in there, which is making a difference. So basically, we'll just be adding black to each of these to get the final hue that final value that we want. Maybe I've got enough of the black out of there now. I can go ahead and put my white over here. We won't push so hard to avoid getting any black pigment in there. Okay, so now, and this probably, I'm sure most of you probably already know that you just add, the darker you want it, the more black that you add to it. So let's start adding some black. And you see how quickly that gets dark, just from a touch of black. And actually, we could probably, just with what we've got here, leaving my brush as it is, just sort of go down this way and gradually create that, because you'll want less and less black in each section. In fact, that's probably a little too much right there. So I'm just going to barely touch this right here. Okay, so looks like I could use a tad bit more black in this one right here. Okay, and actually I've got more black in here in these than I really should have. I could go in fact, maybe I will add a little bit, get all that black out of my brush now, because I really just sort of want to lighten up. Oops, it's an old brush. Probably time for me to replace it. Yeah, let's put a little more white down here just to make that pure white. And now let's lighten these next two up a bit more. Okay, so that's not the best value scale I've ever made, but it's enough for me to go by. Okay, so I just created a value scale using only black and white. Okay, so we've gone from pure white to pure black and a couple degrees, 3 degrees in between, sort of a middle gray, a darker gray, and a lighter gray. All right, now, how can I possibly duplicate this without using black? In fact, let's put the black away right now. In fact, I was surprised that I even found it in my drawer here because I use black so seldom. I usually have it back in storage somewhere. Okay, so let's start. We still have that black right there, but I'm not going to touch that black. In fact, I'm going to take my palette knife and just get rid of that. Get rid of that black. Let's set it over here. Okay, now we will be using white, and I'm probably going to use a bit more white, so I'm going to squirt out a bit more white. That's probably more than I needed, but okay, now going to start off with this alizarin red or crimson. Alizarin crimson. Let's put that right up there like that. Okay. And here again, I'm probably wasting paint here. That's a lot more than I ever really needed. And then start off with a similar amount of this is, French ultramarine. Nice dark blue, nice dark red. Okay, so now I'll just mix with my paint. You can mix with a palette knife. I actually, when I'm mixing my paints, I don't like thoroughly mixing them. In fact, a lot of times I don't even mix my paints on the palette. I'll do it on my canvas as I'm painting because I like it not to, that's what makes it a little more interesting, the colors, when you can look at one color and realize that, oh, wait a minute, that's lots of different colors in there. So, all right, so let's start off just by mixing these two together. Ooh, look at that. It's already looking almost black. In fact, I think, well, like I said, I actually mix on my thing. So that's not even thoroughly mixed, but that's looking pretty black. Now, as I'm looking at that, I see a lot more of the red coming through. So I'm going to get a little more of the blue. Okay. And here, I'm still seeing a little bit more of the red, so I'm going to get a touch more blue. Okay, that's looking, as far as values, almost as dark now. In fact, I suspect probably in the video it's probably going to look almost exactly the same, but I can still see kind of a warm color, but that's okay because that's more interesting, I think. Now, white right here is still going to stay white. So let's go ahead and let's clean out my brush, and we'll add the whites again. In fact, I'm going to get a completely different brush because I want it to stay as pure as possible. Let's grab Let's just grab this thing right here. Okay, let's use this brush. This is not an ideal brush for doing this, but that's all right. Let's go ahead and put some whites down, and we'll add pigment to the whites. So there's my pure white, just like we have right down here below here. Those are pure whites right there. Okay, and now let's get some whites to start with in each of these other two, or other three squares. Okay. Now, what you're going to see once I start adding this black to this black to these whites here. In fact, I already touched a little bit of this over here, and so you can sort of see what's going to happen. All right, I'm going to go back to my original brush now because I actually want that color in there. Where is my? Oh, here it is. Okay, so here I am. I've got these colors right here. Once I start adding that to a white, it's not going to look so black anymore. It's going to look kind of purpley. Okay? So here's what we do. In fact, let's go ahead and come back and get more of these just to get the value that we're looking for. It's going to, except now it's going to, instead of a dark gray, it's going to be looking kind of purpley. Okay, it's getting close to the same value now. Not exactly the same. But let's go ahead and start trying to get rid of that purple hue. And the way I do that is I start adding the complementary color of purple is yellow. So that's going to take away some of the intensity of that purple or violet. Okay, so I'm going to add, so it's going to probably start looking kind of brown now, but it's going to take away the intensity of the purple. You know, actually kind of a greenish brown because the yellow's reacting with that blue in there, giving it kind of. Now though, we've gotten rid of some of that intense purple, and it's pretty close to the same value. In fact, I may have gone overboard a little bit here. So I'm going to add a little bit of alizarin since that's looking a little green. Okay, now it's looking pretty red. But let's keep mixing it in there. Now I've overdone it. So now I got to add a bit more blue. Okay, now we're getting back. Now it's starting to look kind of gray. Okay, and to be perfectly honest, I mean, I could probably get this even more gray looking by adding a little more yellow and blue, I think. Okay, so now I'm going to leave it there. I could make it even more gray looking, but now I'm going to move down to the next one because this is. By the way, you know, if you want to see how close things are in terms of value, one of the things that I like to do is just sort of squint my eyes as I look at it, and it will tell you, you know, how close something is in value. Okay, so now I'm going to, just with what pigment I just have in the brush here, I'm going to come in and introduce that down here. Okay, and because I've already introduced some of that yellow, the purpliness that when we first got when we started working on this one, I'm not going to get because this one already has some yellow in it. By the way, you just heard that smoozer barking, but also I've got some construction. They're building a house across the street, and so you're probably hearing some construction noise in there. Okay, so now this is looking kind of brown, but you know what? My value is already pretty much right there. So that's going to be a little bit of a problem for me to fix the add more pigment to get this closer to a gray, um, it'll increase the value, so I'll have to add more white to that. But before I do that, let's come down and start adding some pigment to this one right here. And, ooh, boy, that's already, in fact, I'm going to take some of that paint out of my brush. Okay, now, okay, so what I have now is a value scale that's pretty close in terms of value to these others. However, it's not exactly a perfect gray yet. In fact, I might need to add just a bit more yellow to some of these to get it even closer. So, but if you squint your eyes, you can see that the value scales, you know, they're looking pretty close to the same values. But I'm going to add, because I want this to be a more convincing gray. So I'm going to start adding some yellow pigment into these. And it's going to increase, well, yellow shouldn't really increase the value that much, but I'm going to put a touch of blue in there because that's looking, or actually, probably. Okay, now the value in this one's looking a little too dark, so I'm going to add a little white in there to bring it back to match this right here a little more. Now it's a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter. So I'm going to look at that, and although that's looking to be a pretty good gray, but this needs to be a bit darker. Okay, I'm looking at this, and that's looking a little too brown, so I might have to add more white into this one too. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty close here. Actually, this one could probably be a little darker. Let's. Okay, so there you have it. I could tweak that a little bit more, but the bottom line is I actually like it when you. I think it's a lot more interesting looking at this value scale. Than looking at this one, the black and white, because when you look closely at where I've mixed all this together, when you in general that looks like a dark gray. You can still see quite a bit of the pigments, yellows and blues and reds in there. So that it's not as convincing of a gray as it could be if I worked with it a little bit more. But the bottom line is, I definitely like this a lot better. When you first took a look at this, especially if you covered up the other one, it would look like going from white to middle grays to black, even though there's no black in there at all. But when you look closer, you can see those other pigments in there, and to me that makes for a much more interesting paint. So yeah, that's how I avoid using black. Hardly. I don't think any of the paintings that you look around here in my studio, there's even a pinch of black, especially if you want to look back up there at that one where I've got the engine, the train engine, and the seemingly black dog in there. I used no black in that painting at all. And when you get up and look at it, I think when you look at the colors, it will be a lot more interesting. So there's my my little lesson, my first color theory lesson in how to create those really dark areas, almost blacks. That's a lot more interesting than using black. All right, I just spent quite a bit of time talking about black. So to wrap up today's video, let's talk about a little bit about what's happening in my studio right now and what I'm working on. And since we were talking about color, this piece right here is a piece that I've just recently started, and so really I just have sort of have the image, the general image sketched in. I started off using a little bit of charcoal stick. I don't usually use charcoal stick, but I have actually on the last couple paintings I've done been using that. It's a little bit easier to sort of change it. More times than not, what I actually do is just start in with a little paint on my brush, and color and everything is not relevant pretty much at that point. I'm mainly just wanting to get the general composition down and my lines and defined spaces and things like that. But I do, as you can see, I have given a little bit of a thought to color in this piece. But what you need to keep in mind is that what you see right now, like I said, is just a sketch. And everything that you see in here, even though the background has a bit more paint on it, everything is going to be painted over at least 2 or 3 more times with different layers as I sort of work things out. But I've decided that I wanted to, this piece, the conceptual qualities of this piece is really my memories. As I think I mentioned in previous video, I'm working on a series of paintings now about my memories, and right now they're very early childhood memories. And I remember this image here is sort of burned in my mind of my mother's aunt, my great aunt, worked in a bakery, and she played a very significant, had a big influence in my life and my sister's life and my mother's life when I was very young. And she worked in this bakery, and I'm not really sure, I can't really remember if the bakeries had these cinder block walls or not, but I also remember that in the basement of her home, they had these cinder blocks. So that's sort of part of my memory. So I'm taking certain memories and mixing them with others. So I've decided to have the cinder block walls. And that's kind of a theme if you've seen some of my other paintings. I like this sort of pattern of, in this case, cinder blocks or bricks, as you can see in this one over here, or other things. So that's something that I sort of a motif that pops up in my work a lot. But yeah, I started the backgrounds, and typically I work, as far as putting down paint and stuff with backgrounds first and build it forward. So I do have, I kind of remember this sort of green tint that you would see painted on walls back in that time. We're talking about the 1950s, late 1950s, where these memories are from. And then also on the tile floors where this, a lot of times it was asbestos tiles. And one of the common colors from that era that I remember is this sort of pinkish tile of these asbestos tiles that they used quite frequently back then. So actually, my original thought, and I've already given some thought to color in this piece, even though this is all going to be painted over again, and it's probably going to change quite a bit. Originally, I was thinking about, just sort of like a black and white checkered tile floor, but then I remembered about that, that pink color in some of the tiles back then. And then also, I'm experimenting, and this is everything's subject to change. These colors might be completely different by the time I've finished the painting, but just sort of the idea of juxtaposing the complementary colors of pink and green. I thought, okay, let's experiment with that a little bit. So yeah, this is really in the very early stages. Got a lot more to do. And what you see right now, you're not going to see in a few more days, because there's going to be other layers of paint built up over it. And in fact, in here, you'll see the framework of this pastry case right here. I just grabbed a little blue just because I wanted to distinguish it from the background. And so I'll build all of this up layer over layer until I come up with the final image. So that's what's happening as far as my own work in my studio right now. Very early stages, so hopefully the next video that you'll see, I will have worked on this a bit more. And and then I think I mentioned before, I don't just start a painting, work on that all the way until it's finished, and then start another painting. A lot of times I will have multiple paintings in the works. And in fact, the painting that I showed you of the train and the dog, that's I don't consider that one done yet. I've got a lot more work to do in the foreground of that one before that one is considered finished. So yeah, that's pretty much what's happening in my studio right now. One more thing I wanted to mention that I would often say to my students, especially when we're talking about these techniques and things like that, color theory, and learning how to shade properly and stuff like that. It's like learning proper grammar and spelling and punctuation and all of that stuff. You can have all of that down perfectly, but that doesn't necessarily make you a poet. The important thing is that you use all these tools and to do something where you're finding your own voice and your work says something about you or your perspective on life. To me, that's a lot more important in my artwork anyway than having perfect technique.